Good morning and welcome to the David and David on Real Estate podcast. We have a very special episode today. We have Ryan Norris from Openn with us today. It's a great software platform, and we're on the crisp of the TRESA new legislation that started on December 1st, which is allowing for open and transparent offers. And what better way to kick that off than with a great platform that really helps realtors deal with the complexities and the intricacies of the new offer process. And so happy to have Ryan here with us this morning that can tell us all about Openn and how it's going to change that offer process for realtors. Good morning, Ryan, and welcome to the David on David on Real Estate podcast.
Thank you very much, David. That was a very impressive intro. So no, it's fantastic to be here, and it's a real pleasure to represent our technology in the Canadian market. And the TRESA changes. I think it's a really good thing for the industry here. What they're making possible. We're a few years along this journey in Australia. So we know the benefits that are brought about for buyers, sellers, and agents through enabling transparency. So it's exciting to be a part of that, and it's exciting to be here.
It's great to have you with us, Ryan. And it's interesting that in Canada, we think we're a pretty up-to-date modern country, and we have a pretty sophisticated real estate system. Yet it seems like we've got to turn to Australia for this technology. So give us some of the history and background of how this started in Australia, and then we'll get into how you get that into Canada.
Yeah, sure. So it actually started in a we've got all of the big cities are on the east coast of Australia. I think Perth on the west coast is the fourth largest city in Australia, about 1.5 million people, and that's where Open came about. Difficult market conditions at the time, and ultimately, what agents it was developed by a group of real estate agents and an investment banker who ultimately they were sick of having a property that had been sitting on the market a little while. Let's say the asking price on the property is $1 million, and a buyer comes along with a low offer. Maybe it's 800, maybe it's 820. They're trying their luck, and the agents tearing their hair out trying to do the best job for their seller, and they're calling other buyers and saying, "Look, I've got an offer. Property's been sitting on the market. Maybe it's 60, maybe it's 90 days. I've got another offer. You should put an offer in." And the buyer of course is saying, "Well, what's the offer?" "I can't tell you what the offer is, but you should put something in." And the buyer, is this agent just trying to bait me here? As a slow market, is the agent trying to bait me into making an offer of my own? Is the offer real? There's no real there's not a great deal of urgency that's created by that message, isn't it? And so they thought, if only I could tell them, if I could say to them, "Listen, we've got 820,000. You must see value north of that." Then someone would give me 830, 840, 850, 900. And but they were hamstrung. And that is ultimately the environment that was the genesis, and the problem that was the genesis of our platform. And so we came into to the local Perth market, solved that problem, expanded nationally fairly quickly, into New Zealand as well. And we're adding another two countries very very shortly, but of course we've also expanded into Canada. So that I think is the story of how it came about.
Wow. Well, when the federal government and David Corman, I know you and we talked about this when the federal government came out, and I think we have a podcast episode on this, on their housing plan. And one of the initiatives was open, transparent offers. And I remember when that initiative came out, I did a lot of research. I looked at Australia because Australia was using this offer process, I think, for a number of years previous to the federal government making the announcement that open, transparent offers are coming to Canada. And one thing I looked for, because obviously the federal government is trying to solve the housing affordability issue and bring more confidence to consumers in the industry. So those are the two major objectives that the federal government wanted to solve. So one thing I looked at, and I think if you guys go back and play one of the previous episodes, is that when you look at statistically what happens in an open, transparent offer process, it actually drives the price up. Now, that's counterintuitive to what people would think. But we've went back and forth on this issue a lot, Ryan, in our conversations, and we know that if there's two buyers in a property that are super committed, and they know that they only have to go another $1,000, another $2,000 to secure the property, that our motivation, our ego comes into play, and that if they know what that line in the sand is, they keep pushing that bar higher and higher and higher. Versus when you have closed offer process, sure, you might know that there is a number of offers that you're competing with, but you never know what that magic number is. And sometimes, people are going to, statistical probability, you're going to have that one or two offers that goes really high. But then, the argument is that if everybody knew that statistically that offer went really high, there's going to be another offer that's going to raise that bar even higher that really wants to get in that property. And as an industry, are we really doing our fiduciary duty to the seller if we don't do everything in our power to get them the absolute best price and to take that question mark out of the market as to how much is that property really worth?
Yeah. And I think to the point about it, favoring buyer and seller, I think first of all, I'd say it's important to acknowledge that the number one complaint of buyers everywhere is lack of information and a lack of fair opportunity to put forward my best offer and buy the property. So that is, I think, something that's important to hit home. I also think perhaps something that wasn't factored into the conversation is that the seller gets to choose. The seller and the selling agent get to ultimately choose when transparency is applied and under what circumstances. So that, I think, certainly stacks the odds in the favor of the seller. Mind you, at the same time, sometimes the seller, our platform ultimately reveals the truth. And or you can use it to reveal the truth. And sometimes the truth aligns the seller with the market in a much shorter space of time. And so there is real benefit to buyers there as well, in the context that sometimes if a seller thinks their property is worth $1 million and really the market only thinks it's worth 940, the evidence of that can be laid out to the seller in such a way that they realize, hey, this is actually what my property is worth. And so there is real benefit on all sides in terms of that transparency. I don't know if that question was aimed at myself or David, so I apologize if I jumped in there.
It's interesting listening to you guys because I'm not a real estate agent. Like, that's not my background. I close real estate transactions, but I'm involved in a lot of them. And like who wouldn't be in favor of transparency? Like, who's going to argue against transparency, being a good thing in a free market? But I always look back to the fact that the process starts with a seller, on the advice of a seller's agent, deciding what the listing price is going to be. And oftentimes that listing has nothing to do with market value or what the seller will actually accept for we don't have a system. I'd love it if the system was, if you put out a listing price, you're offering it, you're going to sell your price for $1 million. And so anybody that buys, if you get an offer for $1 million, it has to be acceptable. We're not in that type of system. So we're always having these low bar prices thrown out there just to attract offers. And then we all talk about, we need transparency and we need real information. But the whole process starts with, just pulling a number out of the air, just to a lowball number, just to entice offers, right? Like, isn't that inconsistent somehow?
Uh, it is a little different here to how it works in Australia in that context, in that agents can elect not to price their property, or they can put a range on their asking price as
Oh,
well.
really? That's
Um,
interesting. I like
yeah.
that.
The But mind you, there's something very simple and elegant about just saying, "Hey, this is the number we're putting on." So it's there's yeah, I haven't picked a side on that particular nuance between the two markets, but it's I can hear that that sentiment, and yeah, I kind of agree with you there, David, that it's it's and there's different legislation in different parts of Australia. In some parts of Australia, you are compelled, if you receive an offer that's at your asking or above and you don't take it, you got to increase your asking because it's that's not your asking price anymore, is it?
I like that. I mean,
Mm.
I like the idea of a price range, and I like the idea that if you don't accept your asking price, that you're compelled to increase your asking price to let the market know what you actually want for the property. I think those are, great rules. And I love talking to, other parts of the world. And this is the first time we have anybody from outside of our immediate area in the GTA on our podcast. And it's fascinating to talk about the different changes and the similarities, and hearing your best practices compared to our best practices. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other. And you know, I, Ryan, why don't you take a few minutes and talk to us about the Australian market? I think I'd love to know. I watch. I know there's a HGTV show in Australia. I don't know if it's Selling Australia or Selling Sunsets, one or the other. But there was one episode that I was watching, and you guys have some beautiful real estate in Australia as well, and expensive real estate as well.
We do. So I mean, it's I don't think it's quite as expensive as what you have over here, but I mean, certainly in some parts, I guess there's some some very luxurious properties, but um, to describe the differences, there's quite a few. I'd say in Australia, the role of the buyer's agent is a little different. It's paid by the seller. Sorry, it's paid by the buyer. So that's one sort of difference. It's not as integral to the process as it is here. The
Sorry, I'm going to ask
brokerage.
you two questions because this is fascinating as you're going to keep going. So,
Mhm.
do you find that there's less buyer agents because of that fact?
There's less buyer agents. Most buyers represent themselves.
Represent
Um,
themselves. So we would call that self-represented party, and they go directly to the listing agent.
that's right. Yeah, in most instances. Yeah, and if they want a buyer's agent, they engage with the buyer's agent. Yeah.
Now, what are the rules to protect those people? Are there any kind of rules, or is it kind of buyer beware at that point?
Um, yeah, it's buyer beware ultimately. There's there's laws as to what a selling agent needs to disclose, but I think it's I like the role of the buyer's agent. I think the buyer's agent here, it helps it helps create more balance of power. I think so. I think that is a and having someone who's truly a professional on both sides, I think is a real service to the industry here. But because you do have some people buying property that maybe don't have as much uh, experience with the process, and sort of have to, yeah,
Push them over the
go through an
edge.
unfamiliar and
Yeah.
uncomfortable, stressful, and significant purchase. So that's one difference. I think the brokerages here a lot larger. You've got if you have a brokerage with 20 sales, a sales team of 20 in Australia, 25, you're dealing with a big team, big company, and I come over here and oh yeah, how many salespeople in your team? Oh yeah, we've got 450. We've got 600. It's like wowzers. So that's another thing that was quite a quite a shock when I realized that. And that actually that I put it down to that. It makes talking to decision makers within teams a lot more difficult because I think in Australia, if you want to talk to the most senior person at an office, usually their cell phone number is on the internet, and you can call them and say, "Hey." But over here, it's a lot more it's a lot more challenging to get through
That help.
that administrative sort of filter, which I think is by virtue of the fact that a lot of these people um, are looking after so many, such large team. So that's another challenge. The MLSs here play such a role. We don't uh, really have the same MLS structure in Australia. So there's challenges in that context, but at, beneath all of that, the fundamentals are what's the same. Buyers absolutely hate being kept in the dark about you know hey, if there's another offer, you got to put forward your very best. And in fact, because of the buyer's agent role, there's two layers of potential uh, misinformation, I guess you might say, between the buyer and the other offer, because the buyer is hearing it from their buyer's agent, who might be making it up to help them sort of try and give them a little bit more of extra encouragement. But the buyer's agent is also hearing it from the seller's agent, who might be doing the same thing. And so there is, and I think for the most part, people are pretty honest in both markets. But when you're the buyer in that situation, you have to, that seed is in your mind that maybe this is the time where the dishonesty is being carried out. Um, and so the fundamentals of buyers not really knowing what the truth is of the situation is the same, and that uncertainty, it affects that buyer's uh, willingness to make an offer, their motivation to make an offer, and what they are prepared to pay as well. It has a real impact on what they're prepared to pay. So when I describe the platform, I say it provides buyers with peace of mind of what's going on, and they'll usually pay a premium for getting that peace of mind. Um, on the selling side, you've got a seller who will align with the market, like I say, in a shorter space of time. Now, in Australia, our average days on market for an open user in a tough market is about half of what it is for an agent who uses non-transparent methods. Um, and that's through providing the seller with evidence to make an informed decision about their sale price in a shorter space of time. So those problems, sellers who need to align with the market and buyers who get just frustrated at lack of information, those are perfectly consistent across the markets.
Yeah, and Ryan, I think you nailed the nail on the head. I mean, when a buyer is purchasing a property, they only get one chance. And if they miss that chance, that property is sold and it's gone. And
Mhm.
no matter how much money you put on the table, you can't rebuy that property unless the person who bought it, chooses to put it on the market again. And I think, looking at the holistic picture, giving people the opportunity to really have an open and engaging process, uh, by, and large would be a really positive thing for the industry. Now there are those small specific cases where it's going to work against the seller, but what I love about your platform is that realtors can make those decisions on the fly and choose to add transparency to the seller process, to the buying process or the selling process, depending how you look at it, which side you represent at any point in time.
Mhm.
But I love the fact that you mentioned, the differences between our real estate market in Australia. I think we're so fortunate, and we forget how fortunate we are. And David Korman and I, we talk about organized real estate all the time. We talk about our organized system of real estate, and I think protecting the buyer and the cooperating side and encouraging the buyer to have a realtor and the seller paying for that realtor is so paramountly important to adding stability and adding depth to the market. And it's very unique to North America, right? That's what I want everybody to realize is we have the two major lawsuits right now, one in the States and one in Canada, that's kind of attacking that practice. And we saw that the lawsuit already went through in the States, and I think it's going to do a lot of damage to that portion of our organized real estate. So, we're going to very closely keep an eye on that situation, but we're very big proponents of adding different layers and really protecting that system as much as we can.
Yeah, like I said, I totally agree.
I'll throw my 2 cents in there on that comment, David, because I never really think of it as the seller paying the buyer's agent. The flow of funds it goes out of the sale proceeds that the two agents end up getting paid. Some goes to the buyer's agent, some goes to the seller's agent, but it's really the buyer that's paying for it because the buyer, it's part of the purchase price. So I always think of it as, the buyer's paying for the services that they get from their agent and the seller's sort of paying for services they get from their agent. And that's just the way the flow of funds go. It just the payment, instead of them paying them directly, it's all done through the purchase price and disbursement of the purchase price fund. So I think we are in a system where, buyers pay their own agent and sellers sort of pay their own agent. It's just the way the funds flow that makes it seem like, oh, the seller's paying for both agents, but it's really the buyer's money.
Yeah, the one thing, like to throw a bit of a cat among the pigeons and in the conversation.
What? Sorry,
The
give me that one again. I want to use
we
that.
have you
Oh,
had to throw a cat among the pigeons.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
Wow. Can you
I gotta
imagine?
make a note. I like that.
But the one piece of it that kind of sort of is I guess you could do topic of conversation on a podcast is ultimately the buyer's agent is getting paid more if this property sells for more. That's the one sort of little nuance in the structure that kind of just leaves me doing a double take. It's like, and I don't know the solution to how
Both
how you
agents are paid more.
Yeah, both get more. Yeah.
Both get
that's
more.
right. But the
Right.
buyer's agent should be incentivized to represent the buyer in that negotiation. And so that's I guess it's just it's an
You would think
element
the
of
buying agent should get paid less if
well,
the buyer
No,
overpaid.
I think
I
you're arguing that the buyer's agent should get a fixed amount, X dollars, no matter what property the buyer ends up buying, you're going to only get a fixed amount. So there's no incentive to look for a higher priced property.
well, I just think if I'm a buyer's agent, I shouldn't get paid more. If I can get my buyer the property, I'm there representing my buyer. If I can get my buyer the property for $800,000 instead of getting it for 825, I shouldn't get paid more for getting, for them paying more. There's somewhat, it's a fairly negligible, in the grand context, but it's just one of those things that I just sort of, again, it's a double take that I took when I did really sort of, I guess, study how it works here, and I think there's a lack of a better solution. I don't have a better solution. It was just one of those things that I did notice, and I thought, I wonder how that might, how that could
Yeah.
work. And I don't know how it could, but it's just interesting sort of thought process.
Yeah, it's I think it's an imperfect system, but I think we're very lucky to be a part of it and to keep enjoying the fruits of its labor. Guys, we're getting to the end of our podcast with Ryan. Ryan, I wanted to thank you for joining us today. We're going to have you on the next episode where we dive a little bit deeper and talk about some customer journeys with your platform. Can't wait to have you back next week.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks,
Thank
Ryan.
you.